For those of you who don't know him, Mike's had one of the most successful practices in the entire industry, period. And I want to say, Mike, congrats. He's recently sold his office pre-COVID. I mean, we're all jealous here and we're all stuck with offices now and we're all waiting to find out what's happening. But so congrats, Mike. And for Mike, he's always one of those guys that's always been on the cutting edge of learning and growing and taking tons of CE. On leadership, marketing, practice growth, I mean, you name it, he's done it. Over the past 5 years, he's also been the founder of an annual event in the United States called Practice on Fire, where dentists abroad can learn the secrets of success from the top 5% of dentists in North America. Mike has always had a creative outlook on how to run a practice by thinking way outside the box, and I mean way outside the box. And I'm sure we're all looking forward to hearing his ideas today. So without further ado, I bring you guys Dr. Michael Ling.
Hi. Good morning, everybody. Thanks, Mian. So I'm supposed to do a 45-minute presentation today on case presentation, but I've got about an hour of material. I'm not including time for questions. I hope that's okay with everybody. I want to start with a poll. Hashan, can you put that poll up? Just curious to see where people are these days with your number one non-clinical frustration in your practice.
We're going to leave this poll open for about 30 to 45 seconds. So please go ahead, answer the question as best as you see fit, and we'll go ahead and end the poll in about 35 more seconds.
All right, so far it looks like the last one is winning, which is good. We're going to talk about case acceptance. Hashan, can everybody see the results or just us?
We can share it with everybody. So we'll give it about 3 more seconds, 2, 1, and we'll go ahead and end the poll. So if you want to go ahead and put your last answer in, we'll go ahead and end the poll right now. And we'll go ahead and share the results with everybody.
Okay, so that's kind of what expected for people that are attending a case acceptance webinar, but I just wanted to see where people are and what kind of interest there is in other types of topics. I am going to talk about case acceptance today, and this is really aimed at young dentists who are tired of having patients say no, who are frustrated by patients who are constantly focused on their dental insurance, and who are tired of chasing their patients through follow-up. I forgot to share my screen. Hold on a second.
And just so for those who are listening, Mike, the poll asks, what is the number one non-clinical frustration in your practice? And 52% of you said, I want more patients to do specific procedures, i.e. implants, Invisaligns, veneers, etc.
Right. So let's talk about how we learn case presentation traditionally, because we don't learn anything in dental school, right? We learn all the clinical stuff, but they don't really teach us how to talk to patients. Personally, I've taken tons of courses on case acceptance and sales and marketing, both in dentistry and outside of dentistry. Probably dozens of courses, hundreds of hours, spent probably tens of thousands of dollars on this. And what I discovered is that there's a lot of problems with the way that we're taught case acceptance. And one of the problems is that a lot of these courses are taught by people who have literally never had their paychecks depend on their ability to close cases. It's all very, very theoretical. Or sometimes these courses are taught by doctors who are excellent, but they have unicorn practices, right? Their practices are so unique, or they have such a unique philosophy or personality that the way that they teach it just doesn't apply to the average dentist like us. Or they're taught by people who have something to sell, right? They're sold by consultants who are using this course to upsell you into a coaching or consulting program. So what I found is that there's just not a lot out there that I found to be very, very effective. And most of the stuff, sorry, my mouse is too wonky here. Most of the stuff focuses on, hold on. The conventional wisdom, right? You hear these things all the time. They're talking about building value with your patients, educating your patients until they accept treatment, or treating your patients like family. This is basically what's taught. This is the summary of dozens of courses right here. But the reality is, if this stuff works, then we wouldn't be sitting here today looking for a better way. So this is the typical sales process in a dental office. The patient starts by becoming aware of you. They see an ad, or they end up on your website. They contact you, they email or phone you. They end up in your chair somehow by making an appointment. You sit down and present a case, and then they accept treatment. What I discovered is that each step here is determined by trust. So if the patient ends up on your website and doesn't like what they see, or they don't trust you, then they don't make contact, right? Or if they make contact, they call you, but then your front desk person doesn't close the appointment properly. They don't trust you. They don't make the appointment. So the green arrows indicate trust. The trust is like the grease that keeps this wheel spinning around and around and around. And there's all these off ramps. So when you don't have trust, there's an easy out for the patient to take. That's what I consider an off-ramp off of this sales cycle. So for example, like I said, if you make initial contact, or they make initial contact, you talk on the phone, they don't like what they have to say, the off-ramp is they just don't show up for their appointment, or they just don't bother making the appointment. The off-ramp when you present the case, though, is often into follow-up, right? So these are patients who, I gotta stop hitting the mouse, sorry. These are patients who you presented a case to, and for some reason, the trust isn't there for them to accept the case, or the trust isn't there for them to tell you why they don't want to accept the case, and they end up in your follow-up system. So let me open this up to you guys. If you could put right in the chat box, why do you think patients end up in follow-up? Why do they take this off-ramp after you present the case and end up in your follow-up, where you're emailing them, calling them, texting them, sending them postcards? Hey, are you ready for that crown yet? Have you thought more about the endo? Interested to see what you guys think. Any ideas? I don't see anybody yet. Nobody's got an idea of why people end up in follow-up. Financial, somebody said, yeah. Financial meaning they can't afford it, or they have to think about it, or they got to find a way to come up with the money. They moved, yeah, there's not much you can do about that. Not able to show them value. Anxiety is a big one, yeah. They're shopping around, yeah. Word of mouth. Okay, lots of reasons. Sometimes another dentist, so maybe they want to seek another appointment, or another opinion, I mean, poor rapport, yeah. Trust, yeah, that's the big one there. I'm gonna figure this out before the end of the presentation, I promise. What I've discovered is that, yeah, it's a combination of all these things, right? A lot of times it's trust. This is probably the big one. A lot of these responses are related to trust, right? They're shopping around because they don't trust that you are the one to provide the solution. Or insurance, right? Nobody brought up the insurance one. I guess that's related to financial, right? The patient wants to know how much their insurance covers before they make a decision. Here's the myth of what happens when somebody ends up in follow-up. Now, this is something that, I mean, I've taken so many courses, they keep teaching the same thing, where they tell you that, you know, the classic consultant phrase is your chart of unscheduled treatment is like a gold mine, right? There's so much treatment in these charts. If you could only find a way to extract this treatment, you'd be a billionaire. But there's a lot of misconceptions in this conventional thinking. The first is, how much is it costing you in staff expenses and opportunity costs to follow up with patients, right? You gotta pay somebody to chase after people, to play phone tag, to coordinate with insurance companies. It's not free, right? You're paying somebody $20, $25, $30 an hour to do that. And eventually you're paying them more than it would cost you, or than you're making to actually do the treatment. And then there's the opportunity cost, because there's all kinds of time that it takes to do these things and energy that your staff could be focused elsewhere. It's also costing you in goodwill. This is a huge one, where a lot of times patients end up in follow-up because they think they said no, right? A lot of times they say, hey, let me think about it. And that's really code word for no thanks, but it's a non-confrontational way of the patient saying that. Or the patient says, I'll get back to you. Code word for no thanks. Or sometimes let me check my insurance is code word for no thanks. And so when we are digging through our unscheduled treatment, trying to get these patients to schedule, there's a really fine line between being an annoying salesman and a trusted advisor, right? You could really upset people by chasing them again and again and again, saying, hey, are you ready for that crown? Are you ready for that crown? Are you ready for that crown? So here's the easy way. This is the much more effective way, not only to increase your case acceptance, but also to establish yourself as a trusted authority. But we're not going to be upsetting people. We're going to build trust with our patients, whether they say yes to the treatment or whether they say no to the treatment. And that's to completely eliminate this follow-up step, right? They're going to present the case, and then they're going to either accept or decline treatment. Now, when I'm saying that we're going to eliminate follow-up, I haven't figured out yet. There we go. When I say we're going to eliminate follow-up, I'm talking about the follow-up that happens after you present a case, right? Melissa just talked about following up with your network to try to build relationships with them. So I'm not talking about things like what I would consider lead management or long-term nurture of your patients. This is the follow-up that happens after you present a case. We want to get an answer, yes or no. So the biggest difference in my case acceptance came when I had this mindset shift. Everything changed when I realized that case acceptance is not about getting to yes. It's about building enough trust to get to the truth. And everything changes when you take this approach. When you're focused on yes, so a lot of consultants teach that, you know, our goal at the end of the case presentation is to collect some money, or to get an appointment scheduled, or to get at least the next visit scheduled. That type of goal, when you go in with that as your main goal, it sets up this relationship where it's me versus you, right? Somebody's going to win this conversation and somebody's going to lose this conversation. When you focus on trust as well, of course you can avoid the follow-up. We're going to talk about how the trust relates to avoiding follow-up. But your case acceptance also goes way up because you're not focused on making the sale. And the more that you present cases, after you do it 1,000, 10,000, I don't know, 50,000 times, you realize that the harder you try to sell, the lower your success rate is. Because patients can sense desperation. They can sense when you want to do the treatment more than they want to do the treatment. So I tell young doctors when they ask, and it's kind of half jokingly, they ask, you know, what's the best way to increase their case acceptance? I tell them it's to get richer and to get busier. Because when you have more money and when your schedule's already full, all of a sudden you don't really care if the patient does the treatment or not. And then your case acceptance just magically, I don't know how, it just magically goes way up. I don't know if anybody else has had this experience. You ever try to talk patients out of doing treatment and they end up wanting it more? That happens all the time. Or have you ever taken your week schedule and you work, let's say you work 4 days a week, and you try to cut it down to 3 days a week, and you end up producing more in those 3 days than you did the 4 days? Because all of a sudden there's this scarcity where you just don't care whether the patient says yes or no, and they end up saying yes more and more and more. And the biggest takeaway from this mindset shift is that you position yourself as a trusted authority. So whether they say yes, whether they say no, whether they say maybe, they love the way that you're talking to them, and they come back to your practice again and again and again, and they refer patients. This is a massive practice builder. Nothing will impact your patient's perception of your practice like the way you talk to them when you are selling them something. It's not how fancy your office is, or, you know, extended office hours, or the range of services, or, you know, warm hand towels. It's how they feel when they're being sold. That's the number one differentiator, the number one practice builder. And like, this is another great thing that Melissa just said, it's okay to sell, right? That makes a lot of people kind of squeamish to think that we're in sales, but that's reality. Anytime we're talking to patients about making an appointment or treatment or anything, we are selling them on something. And the doctors who struggle the most with case acceptance are the ones who are in denial about being in sales. They struggle not just because they have low case acceptance, but because they can't build their practice properly, right? They haven't thought about their sales process because they don't think they have a sales process. And while they're doing that, they end up pissing off a lot of patients, and they can't grow their practice through return visits and referrals. Okay, so let's get into this. The 3 secrets to eliminating follow-up and doubling case acceptance. We're going to start with the first one, which is getting to the truth. And here's what I mean by the truth. We've trained our patients. We've trained our patients to play the game, right? They don't tell us the truth. They tell us what they think we want to hear, because we've conditioned them through years in our practice, through decades in the dental industry, how to talk to the dentist, what kinds of questions to ask, and how they're supposed to behave. The good news, though, is that since we train them to behave this way, we can untrain them and retrain them in a way that is much better for case acceptance and much better for their health. Okay, so here's the awareness timeline that every single one of your patients exists somewhere on this timeline. In fact, every patient might exist in multiple spots depending on their condition, right? So if you have an emerge patient that comes in with a toothache, then they might be ready to hear about endo, but they're completely unaware that they have really bad perio or really bad other, decay or other problems in their mouth. So every patient exists somewhere along here, and each of their conditions is somewhere along here. And we have to understand where the patient is on this timeline before we start talking to them about their treatment. So again, when we're talking about follow-up, there is follow-up required to move somebody along this timeline, but we're not going to sell them until they get to this ready stage. Right? So that's a type of follow-up that we're going to try to eliminate. The reason why this is so important is because we get ourselves in a big trouble when we present treatment or we try to sell treatment the patient's not ready to hear about. Right? So the dentist will present treatment for something on the left side of this table here, and that's when they come off as a slimy salesman. But when we present treatment that the patient is ready for, that's when we're seen as a trusted advisor. And nobody wants to be on the slimy salesman side, right? That's very, very uncomfortable. It's stressful. Patients hate it. We hate it. We want to live on the green area, being a trusted advisor. As an aside for this slide here, when it comes to marketing, we have to talk to patients differently depending on where they are on this timeline. Right? So the way that the marketing messages we send to somebody who has no idea they have a problem is completely different than the marketing message is to somebody who knows they have a problem. Right? And that's something that, I don't know, you guys give me a thumbs up in the chat box if that's interesting to you. We can go into that in another webinar some other time. But here's an example of how dentists do this wrong. We're going off on a tangent here, but you look at dentists who advertise discounts, right? They're going to do free whatever, or discounted implants, or we see it all the time. But they're offering a discount to somebody that's not aware that they have a problem. It's just not effective. Right? So offering a discount works if you're more towards the ready side, or if you're going to try to take somebody that's concerned and shift them to ready, then maybe offering some sort of price incentive is a way to move them from that concern box to the ready box. But a discount is not going to take somebody who's unaware and make them aware. If I don't have a problem, then if I don't know I have a problem, it doesn't matter how cheap you can solve my problem. I'm just not interested in the solution. Okay, that's an aside. Let's keep going here. So we are going to position ourselves as trusted authorities by only presenting treatment in the green area. So here's a typical case. And when we look at this, what do you guys see? We're all dentists in this group, right? Just type in the chat box what you see clinically for this guy. Tooth loss. Somebody say, yeah, he's missing some molars here, some premolars and molars here. Yep. Going along with that, he's got these tori, right? I don't know if this is going to be a problem for making a partial. Wear and impaired function. Yep. I see that. He's got some ridge resorption. Yep, tori. Yep, lots of comments about the bone. You've got this, looks like some buccal composites. I don't know if they're any good. Maybe they need to be restored. Old restorations, yeah. Maybe this could use a crowding. Yep, so I mean, we could go through this. Everybody knows how to diagnose a case like this. And if we were in dental school, the typical way of presenting this type of case would be, we got to take care of the perio first, right? We're going to get perio under control, and then we're going to do disease control, and then we're going to do some crowns to strengthen and replace the old restorative, and then we're going to talk about tooth replacement. We're going to do this in phases. Or sometimes other dentists will come up with a diagnosis. We just did our diagnosis, right? We listed all these things that this patient has, and we're going to say, okay, the best way to solve this is we're going to do crowns, fillings, perio, some ridge augmentation implants. Present that to the patient, and the patient's going to say, "Oh, that's too expensive." So then we're going to back it off a little bit and say, "Okay, well, we can do this. It's a little bit less expensive. No, that one's too expensive. Well, this one's a little bit less expensive." And we're going to keep chopping some stuff off of this list until the patient finally says yes. And then the next time this type of patient comes along, we're all a little bit gun shy because the last patient told us no and made us feel bad. So I'm not even going to talk to this patient about implants because this patient can't afford implants. We're just going to jump right to dentures, right? This is the typical story. This is what I did for 10 years. Another mistake that I've made is you take a patient like this, and I've taken so many courses. I think I'm so wise and know so much about how to restore this that I'm going to present the patient with a menu, right? So here's option number one on the menu. We can do implants and ridge augmentation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Or we could do implant bridges, or we could do partial dentures. Here's the pros and cons of each one. I'm going to go through details about how we do each one and why one is better than the other. Maybe give them some printouts, get some models out, get some iPads out to show some animation. And it's here. Take this information. Here's your menu. You tell me what you want for dinner. Like, what entree would you like? And again, that just didn't work for me, right? It's overwhelming. There's too much there. There's no clarity, and confused patients end up stalling or ending up in a follow-up or saying, no thanks, I'm going to go ask somebody else. What we have to do when we see a case like this, though, if you really want to build yourself as a trusted authority, is to fight every natural instinct, right? We're all so brainwashed through dental school, through continuing education, through our clinical practice to fix things, right? You see problem, you fix problem. Broken tooth equals crown, missing tooth equals implant, decay equals a filling. But we got to stop, right? We have to stop and figure out, take a break, take a step back and figure out what does this patient have versus what do they want. So haves are things like the patient would say, I have a broken tooth, or I have a sore tooth, or I have missing teeth. These are clinical conditions that we see. Wants are things like this on the right side. I want to be able to smile without embarrassment. I want to go to the restaurant, go out with my friends and order the steak and not have to worry that I'm going to get steak caught in my teeth or my dentures are going to fall out. Or sometimes it's, I want to get solutions and pay as little money as possible. All these things are things that the patient wants. And the big difference is here. We can figure out what the patient has by looking. The only way to figure out what the patient wants is by listening. Then this is where we have to fight our natural instinct, right? So we see a patient that comes in with some sort of clinical condition and we just can't wait to jump in there and tell the patient about how amazing our solution is and how smart we are and how experienced we are and how amazing we are at fixing these problems. We don't stop to listen to what the patient actually has to say. We make assumptions about what they want. So we got to get to the truth. And really the only way to get to the truth is to ask the right questions. The best way to, and this is really the best way to build trust. And it separates you from every other dentist because every other dentist sees problem and then jumps into the sales pitch, right? So they see missing teeth and they jump in a sales pitch about, hey, we should do implants. And oh, we don't want to do implants. We got to do ridge augmentation. or we can do bridges, or we can do denture. They just jump and skip that critical piece in the middle, which is to get to the truth and ask the right questions. So here's a series of my favorite trust building questions that go a little bit deeper, just a layer or two deeper than what brings you in today, right? Or what can I do for you today? So a typical dentist might say, hey, Mrs. Jones, what brings you in today? And Mrs. Jones says, hey, I'm here for a cleaning, right? She's in a hygiene chair. And the dentist goes in, hey, oh, by the way, did you know you have this and this and this and this and this? And that's when you come off as being a really pushy salesman, right? You're pitching way too fast. You can't pitch your sale until you know the patient, where the patient is on that awareness timeline. And do not pitch until you get to that green square where they're ready to hear it. I got a few slides of the questions. If you guys want a copy of the slides, I'll show you how to get them at the end, because I don't want to read every single one of these questions here, but you kind of get the idea. I can give you printouts or PDFs of these later on. These are good ones. These are probably my favorite ones here. The last one is a good one. So if we could blank, would you be open to that? So let's look at that. Think about that patient that I showed you with the missing posterior on the mandible. I might say something to her, say, hey, Mrs. Jones, if we could get your teeth back there so you could chew your steak again, would you be open to hearing about that? Or I might say, hey, Mrs. Jones, I know you've been talking about replacing those teeth. If we had a solution for you that was fixing your mouth and we could do it for less than $10,000, would you be open to that? And the answer to that question does a few things. One is they almost go like, whoa, like nobody has ever asked me that question, right? They've always just assumed that I either wanted this, or sometimes they assumed that I look like I'm poor and I would never do this because I haven't brought it up for 20 years. Another great thing that it does is their answer is going to guide the rest of the conversation. So if I say, hey, we can do this for under $10,000, and the patient says, oh, no, there's no way I can spend $10,000 on my teeth, then great. I want to hear that, because I do not want to waste my time, talking about ridge augmentation and implants to this patient when they can't afford it. I also don't want to piss off a patient by trying to sell them that they have no intention of ever buying. So if they say it's too expensive, my response is, no problem, that's great. Let's try to find a cheaper solution. Or they'll say, maybe they'll say, no, I don't care. I'm fine. I eat just fine. Perfect. That's exactly what I want to hear, right? We don't want to pitch these people solutions until we know that they're ready to hear the answer. So that's one of my favorites, is that last question there. Oh, the last thing it does is it builds trust, because patients love to talk about themselves, right? This is a universal truth. The more you can get the patient talking about themselves, the more that you just naturally build trust. Just the act of sitting there and listening to their story helps to build trust. Too many dentists are talking with their fingers in somebody's mouth, so you're talking, but you're not listening. This is a one-way conversation. Or there's too many dentists who are making assumptions, and patients feel like they're being judged, or that they're put into these little boxes by their dentist. They love to feel like they're listened to. So you keep asking questions until one of two things happens. So one sign that you can stop asking questions, you have my permission to stop asking questions, is when you get a buying cue. So a buying cue would be the patient responds with some sort of phrase that indicates that they're ready to buy, right? So they'll say something like, what happens next? Or how do I pay for that? What happened, or what's the next step, or something like that. How long will it take? Something like that, right? So they're indicating that there's some sort of interest, and they're giving you permission to move on to the next step. They're telling you that, hey, I'm ready to learn more about this. There is one buying cue that you do not want to hear, and this is another mini tangent, so I apologize. But if you do your case presentation, and the patient says, how much is all this going to cost? That is a bad sign for your case acceptance, because there is no good answer. There's no answer that's going to make them happy unless you say, hey, good news, today it's free, right? But otherwise, no matter what you say, it's going to have a little bit of a negative effect on our relationship. The way that I get around that is I make sure that I addressed this issue of cost way before this point, right? So if they're saying how much does this cost, then I haven't done a good enough job addressing this concern earlier in the case presentation. We don't have time to talk about that right now. If you want to hear more about that, just type a comment in the chat box and maybe I'll talk about that another day. Diagnosing the wallet, right? The consultants are always saying, hey, don't diagnose the patient's wallet. I disagree. You absolutely have to diagnose the patient's wallet because you cannot present treatment to them that they cannot afford. That's a great way to destroy trust. Okay, so I was saying you keep asking questions until one of two things happen. And one thing that happens is you get a buying queue. The second thing that happens is you feel confident that they are in the ready zone. They're ready to hear more. So a question I get asked often is, like, doesn't this take a lot of time? You're going to sit there and ask all these questions and hear the story. And the answer is it does take time up front, but it ends up saving you a lot of time in your process for a couple reasons. One is that I'm not going to waste time presenting anything if the patient's not ready to hear about it. Right? So I'm not going to waste my time talking about ridge augmentation implants, even dentures, if the patient doesn't care, they have no concern that they have missing back teeth. It also saves time because if they are concerned, so if Mrs. Jones did indicate that she did want a replacement, I don't have to go through the probably half dozen different treatment options that we have for replacing those missing teeth, where I can narrow it down based on our conversation to just the one or two that I know are going to make her happiest based on the conversation and what I understand about her goals and her values. So that ends up saving you a ton of time, right? You're going to spend 95% of your time talking about the patient's problem, and maybe 5% of your time talking about our solution and how and you know the details, the technical details of our solution. Whereas most dentists are backwards, right? Most dentists spend 95% of their time bragging about how good their implants are, and 5% of the time saying, "Hey, what brings you in today?" Patients really don't care. This is what I discovered. They don't care how we fix their problem, but they do care a lot about who is the right person to help them fix their problem. Another question that I get a lot when I talk to other dentists about this concept is, well, what happens if you have this awareness timeline in mind and nobody ever ends up in the green box, right? We have a lot of patients who have missing teeth and they just they're not concerned, or they can't afford it. And they end up, they stay in the red box, right? They're either unaware or they're aware, but they just don't get concerned enough to hear about the next steps. Well, this, to me, is not a case acceptance problem. This is a marketing problem. And there's probably something in your marketing process somewhere that's attracting the wrong type of patient who doesn't care. So again, that's a topic for another day. Okay, so the importance of these trust-building questions, just to summarize that first section I talked about, is it separates you from every other dentist who focuses on haves, not wants, right? Every other dentist is pulling out the iPad videos, the animations, the slideshows on their screens, the brochures, the models, trying to build value and explain to the patient why this solution is so amazing and why it's worth it. It also positions you as a trusted authority and advisor because you're talking to them in a different way, right? You're getting to know them, you're making them feel important, making them feel listened to. And it also reveals the truth. We want to get to the truth about where this patient is on the awareness timeline so that we can avoid the follow-up game and increase our case acceptance. Okay. Let me know, are we on track so far? This is kind of weird talking to a computer screen, so let me know. Give me some feedback.
You're doing well, Mike. You're on track.
Okay, so one person says we're on track. Awesome. I did a webinar before. I was recording it. Did an hour and a half, just like this, like on Zoom. And at the end, I realized I forgot to hit record. I was just talking to my webcam for an hour and a half. That was not a good day. Okay, somebody type in the chat box. What are the key takeaways so far? Any insights that you learned? Any questions or comments so far? Okay. Let's keep going then. Great questions on patient. Yeah. So like I said, at the end, I'll show you my contact info. I'll get you a PDF and you can download it. I have some other stuff. It just gets kind of tedious to read every line of like these scripts that I have. So I'll just send it to you after. It's kind of boring for me to sit here and read it. Don't present treatment without. That's really the key, right? So if the only thing you did, like, you know how people talk about their case acceptance rates and, you know, is it 50%, 80, 90, whatever? It's all BS really, because it depends on how you do the math. But wouldn't your case acceptance be like 99% if you only presented treatment that the patient was ready to hear about? Like, then why wouldn't they accept treatment? We're messing with the math, but that's how to get your case acceptance to 100% is only present treatment. We're being selective about what we present. What do you normally answer? How much does it cost early in the conversation? Let me do that at the end, because there's no short answer to that. Do you keep? Somebody asked a question. Do you keep a record of where they sit in the awareness regarding a treatment plan? No, and then you know where to start off the next time. Kind of, yeah. So the question is do we keep some sort of record of where this patient is in their awareness timeline so that we can continue this conversation at the next appointment? Yeah, absolutely. So if let's talk about crowns, like we're talking like 2 or 3 crowns, a relatively small treatment plan, because the process for that is completely different than if we're talking about like a $30,000 rehab. That's a different conversation. But if we're talking like 2 or 3 crowns out of hygiene, I want it, if I could wave a magic wand and get in the patient's brain and figure out, are you interested in this or not? Because if you're not, that's cool. Just tell me and I'll stop bugging you and I'll stop wasting your time. Right? So if the answer is no thanks and I can get them to say no thanks, no problem. That's amazing. Have a great day. See you in 6 months. If their answer is something like, let me think about it, or can I get a second opinion, or what does my insurance cover? I'll show you how we answer that later on. They'll have a section on that. But if their answer is, you know what, I'm really busy right now. Can you follow up with me in 6 months? Then yeah, we'll write that in the note, right? Next visit, we're gonna follow up to talk more about the crown. So sometimes patients will indicate to us, and really that's the ultimate sign of trust, right? If a patient says to you, Doc, thanks for bringing that up. I'm not interested. You've done an amazing job building trust. If the patient says, Doc, thanks for bringing that up, now is just not the right time because of ABC, then awesome, you've done a great job building trust. What if the patient said, went to another dentist and never, okay, I'll talk about that later on. Some of these questions I already have answered later on in my presentation. Okay, let's talk about the second secret to limiting follow-up and doubling case acceptance. This is eliminating the predetermination game from your practice completely. We always complain as dentists that our patients are insurance dependent, but I think we have to take some responsibility for that, right? We invented this game. Patients did not know what pre-Ds were before we dentists taught them what pre-Ds were, right? Nobody knows what they are except what a dentist told them. So we created this problem ourselves. We spent years, if not decades, training our patients that you must have a pre-D, right? How many times do you hear your staff, this is the worst, is when the staff or even the doctor says to the patient, hey, Mrs. Jones, let's go ahead and send a pre-D. Or, hey, we already sent a pre-D before the patient even asks for it, right? Of course, we've brainwashed and conditioned our patients that this is normal and expected. And when this happens, we get stuck in the follow-up game. So in my opinion, predeterminations are the #1 reason why patients end up in follow-up, right? So we end up wasting time going back and forth with insurance, sending photos and narratives, and then we're like phone calls and emails, wasted time, pissed off patients, poor case acceptance, because I guarantee you our case acceptance over email is way lower than our case acceptance would be if we could talk to this patient face-to-face, right? You just cannot close cases over email at the same rate you can face-to-face. And the whole time when we're playing this follow-up game, our emphasis is on insurance, right? The only reason why we're playing this game is insurance. So no wonder they're obsessed with insurance. So wouldn't it be great if we could help our patients break free from their reliance on their predetermination? So why not just quit setting them? And that's what we did a little while ago, probably a few years ago. And our patients are no different than yours. We got sick of playing this game, and we sat down as a group and started figuring out what are the really bad things that will happen if we just stop sending these damn things. And the answer was, well, really not much. So I'll show you how we handle this. So the conventional wisdom, the assumption that we all make, is don't patients need to know what their insurance covers? So here's what we do for large treatment plans. And large treatment plans would be, the 10,000 plus or the $30,000 cases. I'll say something to the patient like, Mrs. Jones, your insurance plan has some sort of maximum on it. Every plan has a maximum. The type of treatment that we're talking about is going to go far above and beyond what your insurance covers. Your insurance, whatever you get back from your insurance, is going to be a tiny drop in the bucket compared to what you're going to have to pay out of pocket. So anything you get back from your insurance, I consider that a nice, happy bonus, and you can go spend it on something nice for yourself. Right? That's it. We're trying to eliminate any insurance factor from this patient's decision making. If it's a small treatment plan, so small treatment plan would be, we're talking about a patient in hygiene that needs a crown, or the worst, this was probably what caused me to go over the edge on this, is we were sending predeterminations for night guard, which is insane. So to get away from this, we would say to the patient, hey, Mrs. Jones, hypothetically, let me ask you a question. If your insurance company came back and told you they're going to pay 0% for this crown, what would you do? And this is a very revealing question. The patient's either going to say, you know what? I just can't afford it if the insurance doesn't pay for it. And my answer is, great. There's your answer. No problem. This is not the right time for you. Let's revisit this later on. Or they're more likely, probably 80% of the time, they'll say, yeah, you know what? You're right. I guess I need it. I know how much it's going to cost. I would rather if it cost me $500 instead of $1,000, but if I got to pay for it, I got to pay for it. Right? And maybe we make some sort of a payment arrangement if we have to. But that's a way of eliminating this insurance factor. Now, here's another way to look at this. For small treatment plans. And let's say we're talking about just one or two crowns. We're talking about a $2,000 treatment plan. I don't want to take somebody's last $1,000 from their bank account. I'm not comfortable doing that. So if this patient literally does not have enough money in their checking account to pay for this crown, unless the insurance chips in 50%, I don't want their money, right? So if they have to choose between buying groceries and buying a crown, they should probably not do the crown. I'm just not comfortable doing that. You also have to keep in mind that if the patient's budget is so razor tight, like there's no room here, what happens if something goes wrong, right? What happens if we do the crown and then they need endo and they don't have any more insurance to pay for it and they have no cash? Right now we've just put this patient, backed them into a corner where they're screwed. They're out the money and they're out the tooth. And even with bigger treatment plans, we do 10-unit case and it's going to be $15,000. Sometimes there are complications, right? Sometimes you get endo, sometimes you lose a tooth, you've got to do an implant, sometimes you got to redo things. There's got to be some buffer room in their budget to account for these complications. Otherwise, the solutions, if that happens, is pissed off patient, which is no good. Or secondly, you end up doing stuff for free because you feel bad, which is no good either. So I found this script really, really good. This script, I think, literally has produced me millions of dollars just for this phrase. And here's how it goes. We're talking about a patient that needs a crown or 2 crowns or something. Mrs. Jones, if you can afford it, this is what I think you should do. Talking about the crown or whatever we're talking about. If you can't afford it, then we'll try something else instead. It's not quite as good, but it's cheaper. Either way, I'm good. And the reason why this is so effective is because it's just so transparent, right? If we're talking about a crown versus a filling, which a patient comes in with a broken tooth, and we're talking crown versus filling, there's only one reason to do the filling, aside from clinical reasons where maybe you can't do the crown. But if a crown is possible, the only reason to choose a filling is because it's cheaper. That's it, right? Nobody has a philosophical problem with doing crowns. I'm against crowns and I will not do it. Like, that doesn't happen, right? So address that head on. It's authentic, it's real, it's honest. If you can afford it, This is what you do. If you can't afford it, we'll do that instead. Either way, I'm good. I really don't care. I'm here to help you. You just tell me which one you want to do, and let's get this done. The other reason why this is so effective is because it gives your patient an easy out, right? It's so important that when we're presenting these things, that we give the patient a way to say no thanks with dignity, and not have to lie about why they don't want to do it, right? If we don't give them an out, that's when they say things like, oh, let me think about it, or I got to talk to my wife, or yeah, just get back to me later, because we haven't given them a way to say no thank you with respect and dignity. But this way, it's like, hey, if you can't afford it, that's cool. I'm not judging you. It's expensive, I know. If you can't afford it, let's just do this instead. And either way, I got your back. So using the trust language, like I said, gives them an easy out. It resets their expectations, because every other dentist they've seen in the past tells them, hey, you got to do the crown because otherwise your tooth is going to break, and then I have to cut it out with surgery, and then your teeth are going to shift, and then your face is going to collapse, and then you're going to die. Right? They're using fear to motivate their patients. We won't do that. Right? There's no tricks. There's no games. Here's the solution I think is going to make you happiest. If you can afford it, amazing. If you can't, here's the second best. It's not quite as good, but it saves you quite a bit of money. Either way, I'm here to help you. The other reasons why this is so effective is the last two, the challenge sale and get off the fence. So we got a lot of patients who are procrastinators. They're on the fence, right? And I want to push them off the fence. I don't care which way they fall, really. They just got to get off the fence, yes or no. So the challenge sale is a great way to get them off the fence. So if I say to somebody, hey, if you can afford this, this is what you should do. Somehow psychologically, it makes them want to prove that they can afford it. Say, oh no, I can afford that. So I'm going to go on the yes side. Or if I say, hey, it's cheaper to do it this way, a lot of times patients don't want to pick something cheap. So I'm going to say, hey, the cheapest way to fix this is to do this. And by framing it like that, these fence sitters tend to decide, okay, what side of the fence do I want to be on? Do I want to be the type of person who picks the cheapest way, or do I want to get off the fence and do what I know is good for me? So again, I'll just contact me after. I'll give you a copy of this, but that script is the $1 million phrase right there. Okay, so what if a patient asks for a predetermination? Here's what I say. I don't know what your insurance covers. I've seen it covers 0 sometimes it's 50, sometimes it's 80. But just in case, you should be prepared to pay all of it out of pocket. And whatever you get back will be a nice surprise. And then we go ahead and we try to book the appointment, right? We're answering the question and then we're moving on. Let's book the appointment. We're training patients. This is how we do things around here, right? We answer your question and then we go ahead and we book the appointment. What if they insist? Well, can you send in a predetermination because last time you did, or my friend got one, or blah, blah, blah. I'll say, hey, if you really want to find out what your insurance covers, if it's that important to you, then the fastest way to get the most accurate answer is for you to contact them yourself. Here's the phone number you call. Here's the website you visit. Here are the codes you punch in. Have a blast. In the meantime, let's go ahead and book your visit. Right. So we're putting the obligation on them to figure out their insurance, but we'll help them. We're not doing it for them. What if they really, really, really insist? So then I would say, hey, you know what, Mrs. Jones, it sounds like this is not the right time for you to go ahead with this. No problem. Let's look at it again in the future. Right? Because if they're that dependent on their insurance and they absolutely need to know, is their insurance going to pay $500 or $800 or $0 for this crown? I don't want their money. I'm not taking Mrs. Jones' last $500. I will not do that. And one last thing to keep in mind is don't let the fear of one bad experience stop you from doing something that works the other 99 times. I've tried this for years. It works. I mean, I can't remember the last time I got to this stage. It never happens. I'd say the first stage, this phrase right here probably works 80% of the time. And then 20% of patients get to this stage. And this one probably works another 80% of the time. So that leaves 20 of the 20% end up in this, like 4% or whatever the math is, ends up in this situation. Okay, I need a drink. Any comments so far? That's the end of section 2. Any questions, insights from that insurance section?
Mike, no questions or comments at the moment. You can keep going.
Let's go. Got a couple private ones. I'll answer those later. Okay. So the number 3 things, close with confidence and clarity. So a confused patient chooses no treatment or ends up in follow-up. Both are bad. So here's how a typical dentist closes a case, right? So this is a patient, let's say this is an emerge patient, comes in with broken molar, and we'll do our spiel about, crown or onlay or whatever. Maybe another day we'll talk about how we present that part. I want to focus on the close right now. And the typical dentist will say, hey, here's the menu, pick what you want, right? So you might say, hey, you can do a crown, or we can do an onlay, we can do ceramic, we can do gold, I can do Emax, I can do lava, I can do CEREC, lab fab. Here's a menu. Here's the pros and cons of each. Here's a brochure that explains everything. Here's an iPad animation that shows how we drill the thing out, and we do the prep, and then we do the depression and all that. It's amazing. That's how most dentists would do it. Or they'll say something, say, hey, you know what, just let Mary at the front know what you want to do. Or they'll say, the killer, let's send a pre-D, right, which we just talked about. Either way, none of these are good closes because they end up with no decision today and they end up in follow-up. So why is it so uncomfortable to sell? What do you guys think? Give me some feedback. Why do we feel so squeamish about closing this deal, asking for the sale? What stops you guys from going ahead and closing this deal? Fear of rejection. We typically aren't seen as sales. Yeah. Fear of rejection is the big one, I think. Right? And especially when you graduate dental school and you're like so gung-ho and say, hey, I'm going to present my 5-stage treatment plan. It's going to be amazing. And I'm going to show you all the different appointments. And you do that enough times and patients are like, no, like go away. And it just deflates you. And then you never do that ever again. Right? You just don't like being rejected all the time. Fear of rejection, we typically aren't seen as a sales industry yet, not used to or not trained enough. Yeah, so here's some solutions, right, or some reasons. Naturally avoid confrontation, or we're afraid to hear no, or money is an issue, right? So that's a good one too. So we're afraid to hear no, but then I started thinking about, why do I care whether this patient says no or yes, right? They're not saying I like you or I don't like you. They're not saying you are nice or you're not nice. They're just saying, it's like you go to the ice cream store and I don't get offended that you ordered vanilla or you ordered chocolate. I don't care, right? So no only hurts when we take it personally. And we have to understand that we cannot project our values onto our patients, right? Patients have a right to make choices that are different than ours, and sometimes what we think are even really bad choices, as long as they're not dangerous. And they're just teeth, right? I really don't care if Mrs. Jones is a filling or a crown. It makes zero difference to me. There are times when I'm just tired of taking impressions and I want to do a filling instead. And I push the patient towards, hey, the filling, that this might be a great solution for you. And those are the ones, like I said, that end up saying, no, I want the crown, right? The less you push, the more they end up wanting what you wanting what you're selling. Another one is naturally avoiding confrontation. So it's a little bit uncomfortable to have to ask somebody for the sale, right? There's a little bit of confrontation there, but we can diffuse that in our process if we take off our doctor and educator hats and instead act as advisors and advocates, right? I'm not trying to educate you into buying this, because if I try to do that, then it's a win-lose, right? Either I prove that I'm right and you're wrong and I win, or I do all this work and you say to me, no, I don't want it, and now you've won and I've lost, right? So that is uncomfortable. I don't want to be rejected all the time. And the last one is we've been brainwashed to believe that sales is evil. And it is evil if you're a slimy salesman, right? But if you're presenting solutions to treatment that the patient knows they have, that they care enough about that they want a solution and they're ready to hear about it, that's not being a slimy salesman, that's being a trusted advisor. So you should feel great about selling that type of treatment. Here it is, yeah. So if you're in the red zone, yeah, you are a slimy salesman. Sorry to tell you, right? You got to get out of that zone. But if you're in the green zone, then you should absolutely be proud of being a trusted advisor. Very, very comfortable there. I'll live there all day. So how do we close with confidence and clarity? There's really two steps here. First, we ask for permission, and second, we ask for the sale. So asking for permission, first of all, you already have permission to sell, right? Think about all the steps the patient went through to get to your chair. They found you on the website, they made a phone call, they made an appointment, they took time out of the day, they drove to your office, they sat back in your chair, they opened their mouth, let you poke around in there. Like, all these steps mean that they came to you for help. They wouldn't have done all these things if they didn't have a dental problem they wanted help with. So technically they already gave you permission. But I asked for it. I asked for it anyways. So asking permission to sell this is when we're looking for buying cues, right? So we'll say something like, hey, is now a good time to hear more about that? Or do you want to talk more about your options for that tooth? Or are you open to learning more? Or the if then, right? That was from before. So I'd say something like, hey, if we could find a way to strengthen this tooth, to prevent it from breaking, and to keep the cost under $1,500, then would you be open to hearing about that or not? Right? And there's your permission. The patient's going to say, you know what, doc, don't worry about it. Say, great, no problem, have a great day. Or they'll say, yeah, you know what, I would be open. Great, no problem, let's chat more. And then we're going to ask for the sale. So that when I ask for the sale, I try to use a 5-point close. So these are the 5 points that I include in my so-called closing statement to make sure that I hit all the right points. I give them a recommendation. I tell them how much, how long, how urgent, and then ask for their feedback. So here's an example. Again, I'll give you a PDF later, but we'll say something like that. Hey, the cost will be around $4,000. If you can do it, if you can afford it, do all 3 crowns at once. If you can't, well, we can do 1 or 2 now and 1 or 2 later. Either way, I'm happy to help you out. So this is my recommendation. And I'd like to see you before the end of the month so we can get this taken care of quickly. So I'm giving her some indication of how urgent this problem is, because in general, patients don't understand, is this a problem I have to fix tomorrow, or is this like a 6-month problem or a 6-year problem? So I want to give some indication that, you know what, I'm comfortable if we wait to the end of the month. And then the closing statement or asking for feedback, would be, that plan makes sense to me. Does it make sense to you? Other ways to end it would be saying things like, hey, should we ask Mary at the front to schedule that for you? Or where should we go from here, right? But that will give you some indication of what the patient will say. Okay, getting to the end here. So typically what they'll say is too expensive. And my response would be, hey, that's not a problem. Let's slow this down. Is it the total amount that's worrying you? Or would it be easier to swallow if we could break this down into smaller, more manageable pieces? In other words, would a payment plan help, right? So if the crown's $1,000, can we do $500 a month? Or we'll say something, well, that's no problem. How much can you afford? Or the patient will say, I need to think about it. That's not a problem. So you're going to see a common phrase. All of these scripts start with, that's not a problem, right? We don't want to be confrontational. No matter what the patient responds, that's great, no problem. Excellent, glad to hear that. Happy to help you. When people tell me they need to think about it, that means one of 3 things. Either you're not sure this is the best solution for you, or you're not sure I'm the right person, or you're not sure you can afford it. So which one is it? And this is a way of digging deeper to get to the truth. I want to know what the objection is. And I don't want to know what the objection is so that I can sneakily somehow back the patient in the corner. I want to know the truth, right? If the truth is you can't afford it, then great. I need to know that, because let me find some solutions that you can afford. Why would I offend you by presenting treatment to you that is just way out of your budget? I want another opinion. No problem. I totally respect that. Let me get you the name of a colleague in town that I really trust and I know they're going to take great care of you. And in the meantime, let's meet back here next week and we can continue talking. Right? This is a massive trust building opportunity. Whereas most dentists, when they hear, I want another opinion, they start to shut down and start to get defensive about it. It's like, no problem. You want another opinion? Absolutely. Go get one. And oh, by the way, we're going to book back another consult here. We're not playing follow-up game, right? I'm not going to call you. I'm not going to email you. We're going to meet back here next week and let's talk more about this. My other dentist is cheaper? No problem. That's amazing. Glad to hear that. Are you really looking for the cheapest, or are you looking to get your work done somewhere where you're comfortable and where there's trust? If you want to go somewhere else, get a second opinion, no problem. In the meantime, let's meet back here next week to continue talking, right? Common themes all the way through here. I need to talk to my spouse? No problem. Go home, talk to your husband, write down your questions, and let's meet back here next week to continue this conversation. Now, a lot of dentists I know what you guys are thinking. I'm a dentist too. I've talked to hundreds of dentists about this. They think, well, I don't want to make another consult for a crown. Like, that's such a waste of time. First of all, it's not a waste of time because I'm not doing it. I'm not meeting back with the patient. The assistant or treatment coordinator or somebody will do that. And secondly, this is a great filtering step, because if the patient, if we decide that we're going to meet back here next week with Mr. and Mrs. Jones to talk about our treatment, and they don't show up, most dentists would get pissed off at that. That damn patient didn't bother calling a break to change their appointment. To me, I'd say, no, that's great, because now I know the truth. Like, they were never interested, just for some reason, and probably because of me, I didn't build enough trust. The patient didn't feel comfortable saying to me, hey, I'm not interested. So they told me no thanks with their actions and not with their words, which is amazing. Conversely, if the patient does show up, right, they come back with a long list of questions with Mr. Jones and they show up for their next consult, they just told me, I'm really serious about getting this done. And I would spend all kinds of time talking to a patient who's very, very serious. Oh, by the way, this is, I stole these phrases from Dr. Nate Geale's Names in the Core. He's got some great stuff. You want to look him up. Okay, that brings me to the end. 80-20 book. So first of all, if you have questions or you want a copy of the slides, you can find me on Instagram and message me there. I also have some copies of this book. This is the single best, most impactful, most important sales and marketing business book I've ever read in my entire life. 80-20 Sales and Marketing by Perry Marshall. Perry is generous enough to offer some free copies of this book. He'll ship it out to you. But I only have 60 of them. So if you want one, message me and I'll make sure that you're on the list and I'll get you a copy of this awesome book. Okay, just over an hour. Made it. What's next? You guys have questions?
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Mike. I really appreciate it. We're going to go ahead and get started on the Q&A aspect of the presentation. But before we do so, we're going to pass the mic on to Dr. Ziad Hamad for some housekeeping items.
Awesome, Mike. That was great talk. Definitely beneficial to a lot of dentists, especially young grads as well. So thanks for that. So a few housekeeping item, guys. Please type your name and email address in the chat group for CE verification if you haven't done so already. All the videos will be uploaded to the Dentistry Academy YouTube page, so please subscribe in order to receive any updates. Talks from the previous week have been posted already. Follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn to receive all of the latest information and updates on the upcoming talks. Tomorrow at 11 a.m., we'll be welcoming Ms. Rachel McKay. We'll be talking about how to jumpstart your dental career using social media, followed by Dr. Soni, who'll be talking to us about the new patient experience, not just another appointment. Also at 6 p.m. tomorrow evening, we'll be welcoming Dr. Julie, who's going to be discussing the introduction to the magic of soft tissue lasers in dentistry. So sign up today at ddacademy.ca. And as always, the password is TRACK20, all caps. Okay. Now Rubina for some questions.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Ling. As a fairly new dentist myself, I know that this is one of the biggest things that we struggle with. So that was an amazing presentation with lots of great tips. We have a few questions here. First one is from Hussam Murad. He says, what do you normally answer when someone asks you how much does it cost early on in the conversation?
Like I said, there's no good answer, which is why I try to cut that off at the very, very beginning. So there's really two different types of treatment. We're talking small treatment and big treatment. If it's small treatment, like we're talking a couple crowns, like under $5,000, then that will be one of the very first things I say. And so let's say a patient needs endo core crown, emerge patient needs endo core crowns. Hey, Mrs. Jones, here's the problem, blah, 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 blah. The cost to fix this is gonna be around $2,500. We can get that done right now. That makes sense to me. What do you think? Right, so I'm gonna tell them before they have a chance to ask me. And by telling them, it's the same information, right? Whether they say, what does it cost? And I say $2,500, or whether I bring it up, the dynamic is completely different. When I bring it up, it's so much more trust building, so much more transparent and honest, versus when they bring it up, it just feels more salesy. If we're talking about bigger treatments, we're talking, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, like full arch or implants or whatever, then I make sure the patient knows the ballpark of costs before we even get into the case presentation, right? I'm not presenting a $30,000 case if the patient does not know that the outcome we're going to talk about is probably 30,000 plus, right? So we have to find a way of knowing that. So we might say to the patient, hey, you're interested in this type of treatment. Typically, case fees could end up being $10, $20, $50,000 sometimes. Are you comfortable with that, or would you still like to proceed? Right? And most dentists don't want to ask that question because they're afraid of hearing no. They don't want to hear, no, I can't afford it. But I want to hear that, because if they say I can't afford it, then that's awesome. I need to know that, because I don't want to sit through an hour case presentation on an all-on-4and the patient thought it was going to be $1,500 and not $30,000.
Okay, that's great. The next question is from Haitham Alamad. He says, what's your answer if a patient says, I went to another dentist and they said different things?
You mean in terms of the treatment options are different?
I'm
Because
assuming.
I think that's the question, right? So let's just take a simple scenario where it's crown versus filling. It's kind of stupid, I guess, but I said the patient should do a crown and the other dentist said they should do a filling. I'd say, you know what, either solution is great. Here's why I think this is better. And if you can afford it, I think you should do this. If you can't afford it, or if you feel differently, I'm happy to do that instead, right? I don't care. As long as it's not some sort of crazy solution. If it's something stupid, then I might explain to the patient why I think that might be a mistake to do it that way. But otherwise, for most treatment, they're not going to die, right? I mean, you flip a coin and both options are fine. It's I really want to build trust with this patient, and I'm interested in a long-term relationship. I don't really care whether they pick option A, B, or C today.
Awesome. So we've got another question. It's anonymous. How can new grads transition from what they've been taught in school to giving a patient many other options that may or may not be in the right order?
Yeah, I guarantee if you're doing it the way you did in school, you're just developing so many bad habits. So this may not be the answer you want to hear, but the best way to break those habits is to get into a practice where you can do these things properly from day one. Otherwise, you're going to spend, you're going to spend the first 2-5 years of your career developing really, really bad habits. And then it's so much harder to break those habits later on. So I know when I'm working with associates, I like young associates, mostly because they don't have 5, 10, 15 years of bad habits. Because I guarantee you that 99% of dentists are not selling treatment this way. And maybe they're very successful and that's great, but it's different than the way that I want to do it in my practice. So that's my advice is just find somewhere you can work that appreciates this style and will support you in this type of communication.
Okay. And the last question we have here is also anonymous. When a patient asks for another opinion, don't you think that the patient will be suspicious if you recommend another dentist for a second opinion?
I don't know. Maybe they will, but I don't care. I mean, they might go to the guy I suggest. They might find somebody else. If they don't like who I suggest, then great. Whoever they're going to go see, you know what? Go see whoever you want. Here's your X-rays. Here's your photos. What I won't do. This is a big mistake. I will not give them a printout of their treatment plan to take to the other dentist, because when you do that, all that other dentist has to do is say, oh, he said it's 20,000. Oh, we're only 18,000 here. And now you're screwed. You did all the work. You sold the case and they just came in and swooped underneath you and stole your case. Right. So I will not give them a printout. I give them a rough printout saying, hey, here's the ballpark for the treatment we're talking about. It might be, between 5 and 10,000, depending on how, some of the details of how you want to do this. If you want another opinion, great. There's all kinds of great dentists in town. You can do a Google search, or here's a list of people that we've worked with before. But let's meet back here next week and we'll talk about what you discovered and which way you want to go. If the patient comes back, they're doing treatment with you. If they don't come back, what are you going to do? Right? I can't force them to do treatment with me. For some reason, they like the other guy better. That's just the way it is.
That was awesome. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much for that, Mike. A lot of very, very good pearls. And I got to attest to a lot of the stuff that you were saying actually is so true when it comes to my clinical practice as well, right? Is that the busier that you get, a lot of times you just say, you know what, sure, here's what the price is, here's what I would recommend, and then you just walk away. And more people are saying yes to it versus when you're starting out as a new grad, you're sitting down, you're talking to the patients, you're calling the patient, you're going above and beyond presenting this treatment plan to the patient. And a lot of times they'll still, well, at the time they'd still say, yeah, you know what, I'll think about it, or I'm not sure, and everything like that too. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, a wealth of information on so many different levels. A lot of people are asking us about the PDF. Can you repeat your Instagram one more time, or the best way for them to contact you?
Instagram is that Dr. Michael Ling. Can you guys still see my screen? Am I still sharing it?
No. Or you can just type it up in the in the chat line there. That would be very useful. And perhaps another thing too, Mike, is that when we're sending out the CE certificates for this course, maybe it's something that we can also attach as well. We'll talk more about it afterwards if that's something that that makes sense. But I want to make a quick announcement one more time real quick about tomorrow at 11 a.m. where we will be welcoming Miss Rachel McKay. A very, very big one here especially for younger dentists to come and talk about how to jumpstart your career using social media. And then we have one of the best in the business, one of my mentors, Dr. Anand Soni, who is going to be talking about the new patient experience. You guys are in for quite a treat with his presentation tomorrow. And then at 6 p.m. tomorrow evening, we'll be having Julie Bordeaux, who will be talking to us about the introduction to the magic of soft tissue lasers in dentistry. And I know that a lot of you have reached out to me asking for a presentation on laser dentistry. So Dr. Julie was so kind to go ahead and give us a beautiful presentation tomorrow that everybody's looking forward towards. Once again, dtacademy.ca, password, as always, track20, all caps. We would like to thank our co-hosts for the day, Dr. Mian Kwek, Dr. Ziad Hamad, and Rubina Singh. Rubina, Ziad, you guys did a great job, well done, and excellent work behind the scenes as well. And we'd like to thank our speakers for the day, Ms. Melissa Calloway and Dr. Mike Ling for the excellent presentations that they provided us with some great pearls. So once again, thank you guys. We look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the beautiful weather. See you guys later.